Well, hello.
Howdy.
They can't, it's like they can't see you strategically grasping your cup of hot chocolate.
I was grimace smiling. It was. Listen, hot
And they couldn't
chocolate
see that either.
brings out
Yeah.
joy in me,
Mm-hmm.
especially when it's in a Halloween-themed mug.
That's so true. I love it when it's at like a sporting event, like a football game. It's like not great hot chocolate, but it's like outside and it's cold. Have you attended a
I don't think
sport?
I've ever been to a
Oh,
football
I
game where it
suppose
was
because
cold enough.
you're in Texas. That's so unfortunate.
The only sporting event I've been to that's cold,
Mm.
other than like hockey, which in Texas is not frequent, is
Ah,
like baseball if you go early enough.
the great cultural divide. That's so sad because cold football games are so nice. They're chilly, then oh, dang. I just didn't anticipate you not having
I mean, I
experienced
guess
that before.
they got well. No, they get that. That's a lie. High school football games,
High
I do
school. Okay,
remember being at
I
where they got
haven't
cold
been to like
enough.
any major, like
I mean, I
big
assume
enough.
I don't know what like the college foot. I didn't care about sports in college.
I
I
think
went to
my
a few football games, but not
Yeah, we
many.
were like D3 and it wasn't great. It was definitely chilly because I mean, anytime starting from like October, like fall sports would get chilly.
Okay, so I take it back. It was cold, but not
Hot
your
chocolate
kind of
level
cold.
cold.
By I mean, it got pretty late into the season,
Mm-hmm.
but
So
I'm
my
more used to the
recommendation.
hotter part of the
Yeah, that's
football
unfortunate.
season, where it was too hot to wear our marching band
Hot
uniforms.
hot football does not compute. It just doesn't
Oh,
sound right. I mean,
oh.
it happens obviously. Like it was like it's
The
now only
every
fall
football
right
game I
now.
remember going to is
Ugh,
like hot.
ick. Me no like the hot at this moment in time.
Well,
It's finally fall.
me no like the hot ever, but here we are.
So true.
You would
So
not
true.
believe the joy I have experienced at it being like 75 degrees outside.
I could imagine. Because it's finally now like we've had like frost alerts and everything. I'm like, hit me. I know it literally went from 90 degrees to 50 overnight, and then now we're at frost alerts. So
Oh,
just
okay.
fun
Well, ours
things.
just dropped to like high of 74, and I was like, yes!
I mean, that's what honestly I would love it to be like 65, 70 for a while, but that's not gonna happen. Like it was like actually cold the other day, and I was like, oh. Ew, I may have girl boss too close to the sun or too far from the sun. Yeah. And then it's like you want to not break out your big jacket, so then you're in like a sweatshirt and that's not warm enough, but then sometimes it's like hot in the day but then cold in the morning, so you're like sweatshirt, shorts, it's a whole temperature
That's when
regulation.
layering kicks in.
Yeah.
Big fan of layering. Because
Layering
Texas
is good.
isn't really good with cold weather, but when it
Yeah.
does start to get cold, it will be hot in the afternoon. But
That's
you
the
will be so
worst.
cold in the morning, and you're like, oh no.
Yeah, or like all the oh my gosh, stores will have like the heat cranked, so then you wear your cute like cold winter outfit to like go shopping or whatever, and then you walk in, you're like, I am 99 degrees. And it doesn't feel great. Then you have to like deal with your heavy coat. Weather. So fun. Well, I don't have a transition, but
Nope.
yeah, there's nothing really. I don't quite know how to.
Welcome to Romance Your TBR. We do non sequiturs exclusively.
Yes, we do. I am Hannah.
And I'm Caroline.
Hell
and
yeah.
we haven't introduced ourselves in so many episodes.
No. That's fine. That's cool.
But,
That's
you know
quirky
what?
of us.
Our 4 listeners know who we are.
They know who we are. Yeah.
And that's what counts.
Exactly. And if you're new, well, you picked an episode. You sure did.
You picked an episode.
Because, I mean, we agree today. We both enjoyed this book. But what a wild book.
This is a book that, like, if somebody reads it and they're like, I really hated that. I'm like,
Yeah.
fair enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
Like,
agree.
I'm not gonna argue with you because you
Yeah.
either are like, wow, this is so on brand for my like humor and sense of enjoyment, or
Mhm.
you're like, that was weird. And I don't
I
judge
know.
anybody who does feel that way.
And there are so many angry reviews of this book. It honestly, I can read them with a smile because they're funny, but I'm also just like, ghouls who get it, get it. Ghouls who don't, don't.
That's so true. I will
And
also say, the title,
mm,
cover, general vibe of the description do give enough that if you're like
yeah.
angry finishing it, I'm like, what did you expect this book to
Yeah.
be like?
Yeah, I so much agree. Before we get any farther, we are reading Angelika Frankenstein Makes Her Match by Sally Thorne. Ooh. I read it last year around a campfire. That was a great vibe. Weather. It was like getting cool at night. It's like in the
You
summer.
know,
Yeah. Ooh,
speaking of
no, I don't.
weather, I had read this one last year also.
Mhm.
This is a reread for both of us.
Mhm.
But this time I was like, I should reread Frankenstein
I saw that. I was like, "Ooh, I
before
know what she's doing."
reading Angelica
Mhm.
Frankenstein. Because like I read it in high school, but that was many
Mhm.
years ago. And also, like, things I read in high school, I don't remember. My brain
Yeah.
wasn't fully developed. I was just
No.
regurgitating what the English teacher said. I don't know. So I remembered very little of the plot.
Mhm.
By the way, if you have an Audible subscription, it's free. Dan
Yes.
Stevens narrates it. And low
Nice.
key, like, I still don't love the book. Just in
Mhm.
terms, like, sometimes it just got boring. And I was like, Mary Shelley, I
That's what I've
respect
heard about
you, but like,
Dracula.
oh, I couldn't get through Dracula
Yeah.
because it got really boring, and I was like,
Mhm.
"Ugh, maybe I'll get." There's an Audible version of that one with
Mhm.
Alan Cummings and Tim Curry and
Oh,
some other folks.
oh. Well, if Tim Curry's narrating, ooh, I
So
love
maybe we'll give
him.
Dracula a try.
I love him so
Um,
much.
yeah, it's like a
Oh,
big cast of narrators, so
that sounds fun.
I might go back because listening to Frankenstein, I was like, I wonder if I had
Mhm.
figured out audiobooks in high school, what those
Yeah.
English classes would have been like. Anyway, I mentioned this because number one, not a lot of I was thinking maybe she was, like, playing on things from the text in this one that would be
Mhm.
interesting. No. There's
Yeah.
almost no similarities. They're in England, that's not the case in Frankenstein. Their
Really?
parents are both dead. Yeah, they're in,
Is it German somewhere like
like, Switzerland, Germany.
Switzerland?
They move around.
Interesting.
They're
Gotcha.
in, like, Germany for part of it.
Mhm.
He ends up in Ireland at one point. Whatever. The framing device technically is in, like, the Arctic. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just like, literally no part of this is accurate to the actual Frankenstein, and,
Yeah.
I mean, she does play on it because you get to the end with Mary being
I
like, "Oh
enjoyed
my
that.
we'll get there."
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and so it's,
And I mean,
clearly not supposed to be that, but I bring this up because, the Romantics fucking love nature, and
yeah.
weather is, like, a huge thing in that book. Nature and
Oh,
weather. 'Cause Victor's
weather's a
always going
character.
off when he's going crazy, and then, like, nature will bring him back to himself, and he likes to go to the frozen mountains. Because according to SparkNotes analysis, that's where he goes to, like, freeze his guilt, whereas the creature prefers, like, springtime because he wants the warmth
I
and, like,
guess.
sunlight. There was just a lot, and there were a lot of just, like, "Let's go talk about the beauty of nature," and I was like, "Fair enough." I feel like we're doing this a lot, but I mean, can't
Yeah.
argue with that.
They were going to the lakes where all the poets went to die. They still belong.
They did in fact go to well, maybe it wasn't the lake. He gets No, there's a lake for a big chunk of it. He goes out and floats on the lake at night just
What a
to feel
book.
something.
Honestly, okay. I can get behind that. Except for
Well, but then
muskies
he
that could
gets
maybe bite you, and I wouldn't like that. They like the night.
oh my.
Yeah, big fish.
Oh, well, you're in a boat, so
I guess. I don't know why I was picturing him just like in the lake, like floating,
no,
like
he
just like
no,
dead
he was in a
floating.
boat. He was
I
in a
was like,
boat on the
okay.
lake.
Okay, that
Let us
makes a lot
specify.
more
Takes a
sense.
boat out, and then at one point he does
Gotcha.
take a boat out to sink all the pieces of the female
Oh.
Frankenstein monster he
Oh.
was making, because the creature has those chapters where he's like, I am miserable and eloquent, make me a mate. Direct quote.
I've never read the book. My only 2, like,
Oh!
no. Oh, no. We didn't my English in high school, we
I
didn't
just
do a lot of
assumed you had
classics.
read it, English
N
major.
No, it never actually came up in my college curriculums.
Alright, let's
That's
back up
why
and give a brief overview of Frankenstein in case other folks haven't read
yeah,
Frankenstein.
all I
We're
know is
gonna
from
zoom through this.
Wizards of Waverly Place, I think,
I don't.
and the few Frankenstein movies I've seen, and the Scooby-Doo Frankenstein,
Okay, so you can
kind of.
rely on none of those because you
No.
think to yourself, I know what Frankenstein's about, and then you read it. And it's like a story within a story within a story because you're reading letters from this guy who's like on an Arctic expedition to his sister, and they see this giant figure on like a sled being pulled by huskies in the night, and it disappears, and then the
Nice.
next day they come upon a sled on like a floating ice, chunk of
Bird?
ice, and like
Yeah.
most of the dogs are dead and the guy is half
Oh.
dead, but it's a different guy. It's
Oh.
not the like 8-foot guy they saw before. It's a different guy. And eventually he tells his story. So it's this guy writing letters to his sister, recording what Victor Frankenstein is telling him about his life, and then also telling us what the creature says at one point. So there's a lot of storytelling going on.
So was Victor Frankenstein the half-dead one with his dogs?
Yeah, so they bring Victor
Oh.
onto the boat, and he's like, beware, you are also a guy in search of knowledge. Learn from me, and don't follow this tragic fate. And then he proceeds to launch into like a really long, detailed explanation of his life and his parents, and how his mom's dad died, and his dad took her in, but then he married her, and they were so in love, but they were helping people. And it depends on the version, because in the original version, Elizabeth is his cousin, but in the revised version, she's like a
Oh.
random orphan that they take in who's from noble parents, but she's been stuck with this poor family. It's a whole thing. They bring her
Did
in.
did Mary Shelley revise it, or did someone just have the
No, I think Mary
audacity
Shelley
to
revised
Okay,
it.
I was like, so someone just randomly revised it?
No, I don't think
Okay.
anybody. I mean, I don't know. I
That's
haven't
why I was like,
looked
that's
into
a
it,
lot
but I'm
of
pretty sure it was hers.
courage. Okay, that makes more sense.
Anyway, and then he has these other siblings, and this best friend, he's important later, and he grows up really into the natural sciences, but he's reading like crack scientists. That's not true. Like really old natural scientists who have been like very much disproven. And then he
Yeah.
goes to and then his mom dies. Then he goes to
Mhm.
college. And at college, he gets really into natural science and mathematics and chemistry, and he has these great professors, and he launches into his studies, and he gets super into it, and he figures out the secret of life. And then
As
he
we
sets
all
about
do.
to, create or animate a being. And he succeeds, and it
The
opens his eyes, and he is so horrified. Like, he
the
sews together.
college the college to grave robbing to animating corpses pipeline is strong. I've felt
Well,
compelled
in Augustus
myself.
Everett's case, it was no, just kidding. He was a grave digger to college pipeline. Yeah, we've all been there. So he reanimates this sewn together corpse. He realizes his folly because he's absolutely disgusted and horrified. He's like, oh no, what have I done? He runs into his other room, tries to go to sleep, which is so relatable, by the way, to just
Honestly.
immediately be like, I'm gonna go to bed.
That's actually so true.
He wakes up, the creature is in his room, he freaks out, he just goes and wanders around the town at night. Boom, his best friend is there. His best friend wasn't allowed to come to college with him because of his dad, that's a whole thing, but now he's here and he's going to college. He doesn't tell his best friend what's going on, but they make it back to his apartment and the creature is gone, and then he falls into like an intense feverish sickness for months, as you do. And his friend nurses him through it, and then he's like, hey, your family really wants you to come home. He's like, bet, it's been years, I'll go home. Then he gets a letter. Turns out his youngest brother has been murdered. His youngest brother has been
Dun, dun,
strangled in the
dun.
woods. He
Mm.
makes it home. It turns out this girl that she like came to live with the family because her mom hated her, but then all the mom's other kids died, so she called her back home. It was a whole thing, but now she's back living with the family again, so she's like a very close, she was raised kind of with these kids.
Mhm.
She was found with this portrait of the mother that the brother who'd been murdered had on him at the time. So she's been accused of his murder, which is wild because Elizabeth, the cousin that he's supposed to marry, is
Mhm.
like, no way was it her. Victor goes out to see where they found the body, comes face to face with the monster. He knows full well this dude murdered this kid. Does he say anything at the trial? No, she's hanged for the murder of this kid. Victor is like, oh, I'm so filled with guilt.
And he was supposed to marry. Oh my god.
Oh, no, this is a different girl. He's supposed to marry
Oh,
Elizabeth.
okay, so that's not
Justine is the
Elizabeth.
one that was accused
Justine,
of
okay.
the murder and is hanged, even though she definitely didn't do it. Where does the story even go from there? I don't remember. He's racked with guilt. The creature shows up at random times. Oh, he feels so terrible that his father is like, we gotta get you out of here. So they go hang out at their like vacation estate. This is where he boats out onto a lake a lot. He runs into the monster. The monster is now eloquent. He is like, oh my great creator. Not great. Oh my creator. How could you have created me and abandoned me thus? I am miserable. I am lonely. Come with me to my cave where I will tell you of my life thus far. And then you get his story where basically he like runs off into the woods and every time he comes upon people, they freak out because he's terrifying. So he goes and hides in a hovel that's like attached to this little poor family's house and like watches through a crack in the wall for months and like learns their whole family history, which is a whole thing because they're like exiled from France. And then there's this Turkish girl who they helped her father escape from prison. So that's like a whole other side story. He learns to read and speak because they were teaching her English. So he learns how to speak English. He learns world history. He steals some books and reads them. So he's constantly referencing Paradise Lost. Like he talks about how he is both Adam and Satan in this scenario. Well, there you go. So you and the creature have something in common. Anyway, then he's like, maybe if I go talk to these guys, like the dad is blind, maybe they'll be nice to me because he just like craves kindness. They don't. They aren't nice and they freak out.
Didn't anticipate that.
They move out of the house. He burns it down. He's very upset.
Well, I can't
he swears vengeance on all of mankind.
He should.
He murders that kid. Actually, he might have murdered the kid before. No, I don't think so, because he finds out that he's related to Frankenstein, so he's like, well, gotta kill you. He puts the picture from the kid on the girl. He finds her sleeping in a barn and just, like, gives her that. Not really sure why, but he does. Gets her hanged for murder. And then he's like, anyway, I told you this whole story and how miserable I am so that you will make me a female, because I will not be evil and vengeful and lonely and murder people if I have a mate, because we can love each other, and I will just take her to South America with me and we will go live in by ourselves. And Victor Frankenstein is like, I will not be making another one of you. You are a monstrosity and I hate you. And he's like, Father, why have you abandoned me? And he's like, no, you gotta make me a wife because then I can leave. And Victor's like, you know what? Fine, I will make you a wife.
I would have, yeah.
So then he goes off with his friend Henry, the one that was at university with him, because he's got to go talk to some other scientists about some revolutionary new research that he needs to build this wife. Oh, also he's going to marry Elizabeth when he gets back. So he goes off to do this. He feels really guilty about it because he doesn't want to, but he's like, oh, I must. He goes off, he starts to build her. And then when he's part of the way done, he looks up and the monster's been like, he followed him all the way to like Scotland or wherever he was, and he was like watching him through the window. And then he realizes he can't go through with this because what if she is just as evil as he is, and she didn't agree to go off to South America, so what if she just like unleashes herself on mankind? Like, what would happen then? And he's like, oh, I can't. So he like tears it apart, and then the monster is like, I will be with you on your wedding night, and disappears into the woods because he's super fast and scary. And then he rows out into the ocean and like drops all the body parts and stuff in the water because he's intending to leave with his friend. And then he gets stuck in these winds and he gets blown onto Ireland's shores, and the Irish people are like, what's up, my guy? You gotta go talk to the magistrate because somebody was murdered here last night and we're pretty sure it was you. And he's like, I just got here. So he goes and they suspect him and they're like, here's the body. Guess who it is? It's the best friend. So he falls into yet more months of feverish sickness upon finding the monster has murdered his best friend. Eventually, his dad comes and gets him and takes him home. He marries Elizabeth. Guess who gets murdered on their wedding night? It's Elizabeth by the monster. Whoa. And now Victor is wandering around trying to confront the monster to kill it. Also, his dad died. He technically has one more brother. We never talk about the other brother again. So now he's wandering around. He followed him all the way up into the Arctic. Hence, he ended up on this boat. Then he dies. Victor just dies. He's like, hey, my guy, if I die, I need you to take this monster out. don't listen to him. He's very eloquent and will make you feel bad for him, but he's evil. And then he dies. And then the guy comes in and the monster is like lamenting over the corpse. And then he's like, don't worry about it. I'm going to go build myself a funeral pyre. And that'll be the end of that. And then he disappears into the ice.
The monster?
Yeah. He goes to go
Wow.
throw himself on a pyre.
Wow, the
So
natural conclusion.
there's your crash course. Spark Notes Frankenstein. There was a lot of very long monologues in there and discussions about nature and mankind and humanity and what it is to be a monster who has no connection to humanity or any other being who is not afraid of him. There are all of these discussions about, like, he rescued a little girl from drowning in the stream and the person she was with, like, shot him because he thought he was attacking the girl. And so he's like, why am I condemned when all I did was help? Like, all these things. Interesting. However, not even a little bit connected really to Angelika
No.
Frankenstein, except that it's like they put people back together and reanimate them.
And have names, Victor, and then there's Elizabeth, and
Yeah,
that's about it.
Lizzie. Well, and
Lizzie.
then I do think the Adam,
Adam would be the
like,
name.
that's a nod to him in the
Gotcha.
original referencing how he is Adam, but also Satan.
How he is Adam, but also Satan.
Well, that's his whole thing.
That's just a good line. He was Adam, but also Satan. Have they ever made a Frankenstein musical? Because that just very much sounds like it lends itself to like very dramatic singing about being a monster among humans.
Like, I don't know of it, but I wouldn't
Right?
be surprised.
I'd be surprised if it didn't exist,
Frankenstein, a
honestly.
new musical. When? But when was this? Premiered 2007.
Yeah, that tracks. 2007, crazy times. I was 9. Wow.
I'm trying to find The Creature's Tale, parts 1, 2, and 3. There's one song called Why.
Right? That kind of, yeah, that fits the vibe. Why?
Yeah, this makes sense. Well, that's
Huh.
got to be a depressing musical.
Yeah. Yeah. Damn. Well, I think Sally Thorne said this was kind of like fan fiction.
Oh yeah.
So like that. And then I know she was very big on being like, this is not Frankenstein. This is not a retelling.
Yeah.
Like, do not criticize this on the basis of this not being Frankenstein.
Yeah. And it was not.
No. Does not sound like it. It sounds like I'm probably just good having listened to your Spark Notes version, because that honestly, that was very compelling. Yeah, you compelled me, but I don't think the rest, like, I don't think the monologues of nature
5-minute
like,
Frankenstein.
Yeah. I don't think I need any more, but I enjoyed what I got. But I do want more of Angelika Frankenstein, and I will be so angry if people being upset about a fun book makes it not happen, because Sally is like, I will write a second one if people want it. And I'm like, Sally, I'm people. I want it.
The second one what?
Of this. Like, she'd write it in the same world.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's like she was like open and willing, but I don't know how the reception was, like, critical. Besides Goodreads, because Goodreads is flawed. The Kindle rating was very high, so that made me happy. So I'm like, maybe. But I would love more in this world, because Sally Thorne writing historical is just something I didn't know would ever exist. And it was so weird. She's so weird. It tracks so much. Like, all of her books are just weird, but this one obviously was the weirdest. But like, it's so her, and I'm just like, wow. It makes a lot of sense. Because she has like a giant, or I suppose miniature, I don't really know, dollhouse, and it's Blackthorn Manor, which is the manor in the book. That's how the book was started, was from the dollhouse that she had. And then I think during COVID quarantine, she was spending a lot of time with the dollhouse. And I was like, why don't I just write a really banging book about this dollhouse? And I was like, yeah, why don't you? And she did. Also the narrator. before we say anything about the actual plot, I loved the narrator. I thought she was great. Um, just a fantastic story. The pacing was so weird, but I was like for it. Nothing in that book did I anticipate.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true and relatable.
Yeah. And then I was like sobbing when I first read it, and it still makes me emo, and I'm just like, I didn't anticipate that either. I was like, what? Mm, what a
Yeah, it did
time.
make me tear up.
Yeah.
There's the one, I think it's when Angelika is like, "Okay, we gotta let him go." I was like,
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's like the found family a lot of times like gets me, and like she obviously had her original family, but like I think like recognizing
No, but the
some of
original
the
family pissed me
servants.
off too much.
You didn't like them?
No. Here's the thing. I can see like a certain level of Angelica being, kind of spoiled, not always thinking
Mhm.
about other people. But she was never, at no point was I like, yeah, they're right. Like she's super
Yeah.
spoiled and needs to get. She just
Yeah.
had to kind of learn to like be a little bit
Mhm.
less selfish. But she was never like,
No, I agree. No, I enjoyed her transition from like
yeah.
a
But
little less selfish, but
but
yeah.
I was like, Mary, what is going on here? I mean, Mary, I think of anybody is the only one who really has room to talk because she's stuck like
Yeah.
lugging buckets of water
Mhm.
around. But even so, I was like, okay, a little harsh, a little like I always knew you were heartless. That seems like a lot.
Yeah.
And then there's the part where she's upset anyway, and then she comes in and has found Lizzie replacing her as Victor's
Mm.
assistant and is upset, and she's like, I gotta get out of here. And Victor's like, oh, she's just looking for attention, like always. I was like, Victor, the audacity, completely unfounded. I don't know where you're getting this. So that
Yeah.
made me mad.
'Cause I think Victor's supposed to be, like, likable, but also extremely unlikable,
Sure, which,
you
like,
know?
the OG Victor Frankenstein, the worst.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, 'cause I never, like, disliked him, but I was definitely, like, on Angelica's side throughout
yeah,
the book, you know? Like, I
yeah,
had fun with it, like, I enjoyed what his character, like, did because other
sure.
things happened, but I was definitely on Angelica's side.
No, I didn't dislike
Yeah.
Victor, but
Mhm.
he was the worst at times, but he was funny, so it was like,
Like any older
okay.
brother, yeah.
But it just the sheer amount of, like, shit that Angelica got for not
She
a
did.
lot, I was like, "Why are we attacking this girl?" She
And she really felt unlovable. Ugh, poor girl. But
I just
then
needed somebody to be obsessed with her, and
well, she made
she
him.
was very, open to that.
She was so open.
There's a
Um
line I wrote down a different quote from, like, every time I read this book now, there's gonna be something else that sticks with me, um, because he asks her at one point, "What is your ambition beyond spending money and pursuing the goal of being adored?" And I was like, "Oh my god, I'm Angelica Frankenstein. Like,
Yep,
those are my ambitions,
yep.
spending money and being adored."
"Hi, it's me. I'm the problem, it's me."
The other one that gets me and is there's a part, and this has stuck with me since the first time, it's still my favorite quote, is she goes, I think it's my problem. No, my crime, in addition to body snatching, is being lonely.
In addition to body snatching.
It takes me out.
Uh,
That's the
yeah,
vibe. That's the
so
best quote I could give to explain the vibes of this book.
honestly, because she's so lonely, and it's so sad, and you're just like, "Oh, go create your own fated husband. Go do that. Go chop up some bodies and
Oh
do
no.
that." And she did. Yeah,
She
I mean,
did.
people were so angry that she gave him a different body than his, and I was, like, sad for him, I was like, "Oh, that kinda sucks for him," but I was also like, "But Frankenstein, you put things
Right.
together."
Right, that's the point.
Yeah, so nowhere was I like, "Ah, pitchforks."
Well, and she
You
even
know?
addresses she's like,
Yeah, she didn't
saying,
want to
"I'm
at
really
first, it was
sorry.
Victor.
But then later she's
Mhm.
like, "I really wish that I had not done
Yeah,
that."
yeah. So I thought it was funny and handled well, because she did, uh, get him a bigger, penis, which was hilarious, I thought.
Sure.
And I
The
was just
second
like, the second largest, because the
Okay,
first
yeah.
largest was just too much. Too much. Monster, if you will. Yeah,
I
people
just read
were
one of
not
those
happy about that.
crazy Halloween novella, those
I saw
Halloween
that.
novellas,
Yeah.
and that one, he had truly a monster dick, because I was like, "Oh, that doesn't sound like a good time to me."
Was that the double one, or was that not the double one?
It was Seduced by the Pumpkin King.
Mm.
There was a part where she was standing, and it was, like, between her boobs.
That just happened in something else that I read. Was she standing in that one too? I did
I
not
don't
read this Seduced by the Pumpkin
I
King.
don't know, I just know it was so large. It also has a slithering tongue, similar to, the other one that we read, where he's
That
able to,
Jack.
like, cunnilingus, but while standing up.
Wow.
This isn't really.
I mean,
Anyway.
Angelika would be down. She'd be down for it. Like,
That's probably true.
she'd do it. I think she'd have a good time. If she could, like, reanimate a pumpkin, odds are she would. So you heard it here first. I don't even know what kind of, like, you're a furry, but not, you're like a seedy. You're a
I think
viney.
we should move forward. I think we should
You're a
leave this.
spicy pumpkin
I
spice.
realize that I introduced the topic, but I think we should.
Depart.
Yeah, we should move
We
past
are
that now,
departing.
because I hate that so
Nearly
much.
departed.
I'm sorry, I did. Name that movie? That's probably too obscure.
Ye-
Home Alone. I
What
think a
was the
lot
first
about the
part of it?
scene where John Candy is telling her
Uh-huh.
about how he left his kid at a funeral home,
Yeah,
which I'm pretty sure that whole scene is improvised.
it was, yeah.
And Catherine O'Hara is like,
Just staring at.
something like, let's move on, and he's like, I mean, you brought it up, and she goes, sorry, I did.
What a good movie and scene. What else? So yeah, I thought the appendage shopping was fun. That was fun to me. And I know there were some things that they were like, why would she be discussing this with her brother? And I was like, I don't know.
Well, because what do you mean, why?
Like,
Because they
yeah, like,
live
they were like,
alone.
that's, like, incestuous. I'm like, well, I read enough incest this year to not be bothered by that one.
The
'Cause
irony
I
is
didn't see
that
it.
in the original Frankenstein,
Was
Victor
there?
marries his cousin.
Oh, I was like, "What?"
I mean, cousin, but like,
Yeah. Yeah. And that was a question we've had before. How many like, how close in the family tree is a cousin? Like, yeah.
I just read something
Um,
else where they marry their cousin, I'm pretty sure.
well, the one that we read, they weren't. There was one that they were, like, very, very distant cousins. I think their last names were the same, and I was like, that's a little too close for me. Like, if I know that you're related and have the last name rather than, like, two different people with the same last name, but they're not related. These are situations I've never encountered in real life. Just
Nope, I've confused
musings.
myself.
Relatable.
I don't know. Maybe I was thinking of An Unwilling Bride, where they're
Yeah.
not actually related, but
They were both,
parents
like,
are
incest.
married.
What else?
Well,
Yeah,
also
I
though,
mean,
I thought she did a good job of, like, Lizzie would tell her things about her brother, and she would be like,
mhm.
"Ugh, stop talking to me
Yeah.
right now."
Yeah. I mean, I think most people, like, if they wanted to dipped within the first, like, 2 chapters. And so they really, which, again, I'm not shaming, DNF shaming. You DNF whenever you wanna DNF. I wish I could more. But I just think if they would've kept reading, they maybe would've been, like, a little bit enlightened, a little bit closer to God or Satan or Adam.
Making some grand statements here.
Monster statements.
I mean, I do think if, like, the style works for you and you start it
Mhm.
and you're like, "Oh, this might be taking too lighthearted things that I don't love." I think that's one of
Yeah.
those things where it gets more serious as it like,
It does, yeah.
you think they're just kind of like, "Oh, silly, haha, we're gonna
That's a
build a
good
body
point.
out of other body parts and reanimate it, and that's
Mhm.
it," when in reality, it's like, "Yeah, but then he's in, like, chronic terminal
Pain.
pain,
Mhm.
and you have the one who's, like, out in the woods, and, like, the
Mhm.
juxtaposition between those 2 and him wanting to go back and find his old life, and, like, all of these
Mhm.
other that,
And
you
there's
know,
religion in there.
the religion is a really big thing.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point, where it starts off, like, I don't know
Very
what
flippant almost.
flippant, yeah, yeah. And then
It's because Angelika is, like,
yeah.
well, and Victor, but
Mhm.
it takes
The
Will
course of the
being
book,
like,
yeah.
"Hey, I am in constant pain and also
And
dying."
you did this to me.
Right.
You claim to love me, but you did this to me, and I also apparently love you. Like, I feel like I love you, but also I hurt and I'm angry at you. Yeah. It was again, like, just nothing was expected. Like, I just did not expect any of those conversations to go where they went, and, like, the plot meanders quite a bit, but in, like, an enjoyable, like, fulfilling way, like, all these different things were discussed in, like, different moments. Because then, um if you haven't read the book, obviously there'll be spoilers, but, like, there are 2 monsters created, or not monsters, but Victor's one, he doesn't really pay much attention to, like, creating it. He just wants, like, the biggest, like, parts and to make it very showy because he wants to upstage this other scientist. And then Angelika wants to, like, create a husband, and this is their 4th attempt, I think. So, like, she was, like, the body of Will, like, spoke to her in her mind, kinda, like, faded. She was like, "Do you wanna come back to life?" He's like, "Yes." Um, and so then she, like, had a connection there, and then Victor was like, "But you gotta, like, stitch him back together," like, because his body was undamaged. So they could have just reanimated him that way, but Victor was like, "We've committed this far. Why don't we commit just a bit more by giving him some big muscles and a big was it, oh, no, it wasn't the blacksmiths. It was someone
No,
else's, we don't
it
know.
came from they had a collection.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they did have a
It was the 2nd largest in their collection.
it's just so funny. Yeah, so that happened. So there were 2, and then they reanimated Victor's first, and then he kinda just ran off. Most notably, he had the hands of Angelika's corpse. And so because they cut off his arms to make him more muscular. And so there was a ring on that, which ties in later to the plot. So then he's running away, Victor's chasing him, and then Angelika kinda is, like, fending for herself, like, she still has to, like, animate hers, and it was, like, lightning, and they put him in placenta. I mean, I will say Sally, like, thought of the logistics, and I was like, "Honestly, if you wish hard enough, it could maybe work." I thought the fix at the end was
Ah!
very inventive. That one, because I
Yeah,
didn't see it like, I was like,
yeah.
"How are we going to resolve this?" Um, and I was like, "You know what? Like, if that was possible, like, if any of this was possible, I could see that being the correct fix to this." Um,
If we had stitched together and reanimated bodies,
and they were alive.
I could see how a blood transfusion would be
Yeah.
although we're not even are they even the same blood type?
I mean, that is so they're faded, of course, but then obviously there's the Adam who is also getting Victor's blood, so maybe he's faded there too. That's a great question that we don't need to ponder.
Father, help.
So yeah, so they basically have like their little creations, and then Angelica's like big on like you are your own person, like you have a room, but she's also like, I want you to dick me down really badly because I'm lonely and you're very attractive. Um and your new penis really wants me. That was funny, I thought. He's like, this is not my penis. And then it wasn't. And he's like, but whoever's it was extremely attracted to you. And I was like, yeah. Again, like nothing. I just didn't anticipate any of it. It was so funny. And then they just, like,
Yeah.
because then Elizabeth, like, shows up, and she's engaged to Victor, and then they kinda, like, do their things. There's just, like, a lot of
And then
conversations
you have the
between Will.
whole side triangle, love triangle
Uh-huh, and then
plot
there's a love
line, Earth
triangle.
Square.
Yep, which had me scared at the beginning because I was like, "What? I don't wanna deal with a love triangle," but I ended up liking Christopher and, was it Clara or
Mhm.
something that he ends up with? I thought that was cute. Because yeah, then they were, like, trying to investigate all the different, like, paths that could have been because they didn't know who this guy was, Will, like, in his past life. And so they're trying to find, like, who he was. Like, there were, like, a few hints and, like, he had, like, a huge fascination with plants, and then there was, like, a little bit religious, like, he realized he was religious, and there were a few other things. And then they go to, like, this military academy where she meets the Christopher. He's, like, the some guy there, and then he's like, "Yeah, we just had like, an accident, some guy died," and then they go visit his widow, and they think it's gonna be Will, like, his widow, but it wasn't. Um, and then that's how they meet those 2, and then they become part of the plot, like, they're kinda, like, part of the family. Like, by the end, she has a baby, and then, like you said, like, there's the Mary, the maid, who is, like, very old, too old to be doing what they're asking her, but then Angelica's like, "Why don't you just, like, stop working?" But she said it in a way that was like, "We're kicking you out," rather than, like, "You just don't have to work, but we'll still, like, provide for you," and then
That one
that
was
was the whole
funny
thing.
because the first time I read it, uh, I don't know why, I just, like, did not realize until Mary freaked out. I was like, "Why is
Mhm.
she so upset?"
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
Mhm.
I guess you could take it that way. On the reread,
Yeah.
knowing that Mary was gonna respond that way, I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, you know what? She was right." It does sound like Angelica's like,
Yeah.
You're too
Me
old.
too.
You need to leave."
Uh-huh, because she never said, like, "You can stay here, like, we will provide for you, and, like, you will have a home," but it was just like, "You're just too old, and, like, we got this new younger one, like, what isn't that nice? Aren't you happy?"
Pick it up. I also respect that Mary just yeets herself out to the woods and stays there
Yeah,
and is like, "I will be here until
and is
she."
tormenting the monster. She's tormenting
Aren't we
Adam.
all? And Adam also like, so funny to me because, again, Frankenstein's creature is known for being, like, hilariously eloquent
Mhm.
because by the time he shows up, he's spent months reading, like, intense history books and Paradise
Mhm.
Lost. So he shows up and gives these long, eloquent speeches about how miserable and lonely he is, whereas this creature doesn't have the
Adam.
benefit of going and, like, reading all these books, so he doesn't have that, but also still manage. I mean, obviously, we're not getting quite as far into the, like, human versus monster,
Mhm.
like,
Yeah.
outcat, all of that, but he does kinda touch on the, like, "Why are you a gentleman? Why do you get to live in the
Mhm.
house, whereas I'm,
Yeah.
like, living out here with Granny?"
I'm so happy that they also, like, brought him into the family too. I was so sad for him. I was like, "Oh, he's just so alone, and his hands hurt too, and he's being antagonized by a grandma." But then he loves her because she's the only family he has, and it was emotional. Mm, yeah, and then there was just what else? 'Cause, I mean, by the end, you're like they're both creations are, like, experiencing like, they're all very cold, they don't eat, um, their joints seize up, they need massages, they're not functioning well, um, and I think, like, Will, like, passes out. He has a whole he gets kind of, like, interrogated by this, was he a priest
Well,
or a
the
father or whatever?
the priest recognizes him.
It was the priest, right? Yeah. Um, yeah, because then they go to the place to look if there's any records of him or whatever, and then the priest recognizes him, and then the priest kind of like passes out, or he like kind of goes a little bit bananas, and then Will after that was like talking to that guy, and he's like, "You have to stay here. I know that you were dead," and but then because the guy was selling bodies, so he's not great either, and he was like using funds to like give himself all this luxurious like jewelry and marble and all of that. So he's not great. And then Will kind of passes out, which honestly, we've learned that when in doubt, faint.
No, full on Will dies multiple times.
Yeah, and then after that, he dies.
He dies and she breathes his soul back into him. And then he
Yeah,
dies some more times.
that does happen. And then they're like, you gotta just let him go. Like, if he comes back. And she's like, but he's the love of my life. Because at that point, like, they were just so cute. Took baths. Ugh. Yeah, I was like, I don't know, Sally, how we're getting out of this. I was like, I don't know what we're gonna do. But then it turns out that Victor in the 11th hour comes in with a pig intestine and a dream. And fashions a blood transfusion, like, needle
Sometimes all you got is the
thing.
pig intestine on a dream.
Yeah. And then Sally's blood is now Will's blood. And we found that Will's real name was Arlo and that he was the replacement to the
Yeah.
priest. That's why the priest knew him. Arlo was not on my bingo board of names that he was going to have. And I was like, forever, he is Will to me.
Yeah, I will say Arlo not a hot name. It's
Part of
not
me was
Will.
hoping that came from Frankenstein. So I was like, Sally, what?
No.
Arlo? Like, there's not much saving that. I would prefer to add him to Arlo. Because he was also a little virgin. He was a little virgin priest. Which I guess makes sense if his name was Arlo. I don't know what Arlos are getting into, but it doesn't sound like
Or
many
because
women.
he's a priest, but
I mean, that too, but I feel like it started with the name. He was destined. But yeah, I mean, it's like a surprisingly a hot book for not a lot of detail. Because like Sally Thorne, I think, does that really well. I've read all of her books that she's published, which I think is 4 right now. She's coming out with a novella anthology soon with like Christina Lauren and stuff. She has really perfected the kind of like vague sex scenes where they're not vague. You still know what's happening, but they're not like crazily explicit. I don't know. They like the scene in the hating game. It spanned like 2 chapters, but it still wasn't very like concrete. But I don't know. It was a really good scene. Just side note. I just love her writing. But in this book, they were a little kinky and it was funny. And he was like, I was a good virginal boy. I've never had my fingers inside a woman. And I was like, hot. I was like, okay, cool. Because I didn't know. Like, I didn't know what to expect. Because I was like, I could definitely have seen her just doing this like closed door and like fully like shutting the entire door, just 'cause sometimes authors transition genres or whatever, and that kind of just scares me. Like, I don't know what's gonna happen. So I was pleasantly surprised by the level of detail we got, and I thought it was funny that they alluded to 69 and a lot of other things. I was like, you go, you little crazy kids, you reanimated corpse. So
I will say
that happened.
I'm as a Catholic, will not be reading Priest or
Oh
any of
yeah.
the other like
Mm-hmm.
no shade to anybody who has or does or enjoys that. Go forth, read what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Just me personally, not a thing I'm interested in reading. This one took an interesting
Mm-hmm.
take on religion that I
Yeah.
thought was handled
Yeah.
very well.
It was
Kind of didn't
definitely.
go the way I was expecting, just because Victor was
Mm-mm.
so like, we hate the church because they told me to pray and my mom died instead of like getting a doctor. Valid.
Mm-hmm.
But then to take that and have the religious character come in and be like, I don't like that he's forcing that on you though.
Yeah.
Like, you should be able to make your own decisions about what you believe.
Mhm. Yeah, because I mean, even Will slash Arlo, but really Will, um, like he just turned to the church because like he didn't really have anything else. Like his parents
Right. Well, but I
were
like that
very
he was
cold.
genuinely religious even
Yeah, like it
before
was a
he fully
very
remembered who he was. Like,
it was
he
very
was a religious
interesting.
person. And
Mhm.
it wasn't like, oh, I just had to become a priest, but I actually
Yeah.
hate religion. And like,
Yeah.
you're right. It was like, I entered the
Because
seminary at
his
8. It was not something that I really wanted for myself, but he does
mhm.
still pray and like believe in God and want.
Because I
Like,
think his
he has his
friend
own
died.
relationship. Yeah.
I mean, his friend had died young. It has something to do with the plant, like his love for plants or something. Yeah, I that was another term where I was like, oh, that's really fascinating how he put him into this like very unreligious family, because to where Angelika was like scared to tell Victor that Will was religious and or going to be a priest. Um, yeah, I just thought it was handled really well. I really enjoyed it here. I thought it was an interesting conversation, and it really like, I don't know, sparked some ideas and just thinking about things. Thanks.
Just thinking about things.
Thanks, yeah. But yeah, I just really hope she writes more. I just hope that that happens, because I'd want to see it. Because I get so emotional at the end, and I'm like, but if it didn't have to end, I'd be so happy. Because then they have their little cottage, and they live. Oh, and they have a little baby who does not look like Will because he's got different genetics. Little dark haired baby boy. I'm like, oh my god. And then like the house was like a character, like because the house, like the book starts with like the house being the narrator, kind of, um, with like this kind of the spirits of like their parents, and then that's kind of how it ends too. And for some reason that really got me. I was like, oh, the house. Yeah, I don't know. This book does it, and again, the narrator was so good. It's a very good audiobook. And I believe it's still on sale on Audible right now. It may not be, but I think it is. Or Chirp or something. I think the audiobook's on sale. If you're listening to this and you're like, wow, I want to listen to the audiobook, you can get it on sale. So there's that. I love a good audiobook sale. But, I mean, I don't really have much else.
No. Nothing to add. I do feel like it's one of those, actually, I don't know that I would recommend this to people who love Frankenstein unless they are, like, I enjoyed Frankenstein from an academic perspective. I don't know that it's necessarily one that I'm like, ooh, I just want to, like, dive back in and reread, but, like, it was an interesting read. I think if you're like, I love Frankenstein, but also don't take it too seriously.
Yeah.
It's giving, you know, like the Barbie movie ads where they were like, if you love Barbie, this is for
Yeah.
you. If you hate Barbie, this is for that's the vibe.
Yeah, you're right. Because, yeah, you could hate Frankenstein and still have a good time. Oh, yeah, because then at the end, Mary's niece is Mary Shelley, who then writes kind of a recounting, like,
Well, I think the idea is that she just needs inspiration,
for
and
her
so
book,
she,
and just
yeah.
writes that one. Nature. Honestly, again, I haven't read Frankenstein, but Victor's character, he seemed like if he was transported into the world of Frankenstein, would also love nature and just love being dramatic in it.
Well, he is dramatic.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. Well, I think that was a success. Just like this book. I don't know. My brain. It is, as of this episode, October 13th. Ooh. And Halloween's on a Tuesday, like we said last time. So Halloween TBR and just spooky things. We've got Gaywyck next week. And then something. I just got the audiobook for Bewitching by Jill Barnett.
There's an audiobook?
Yeah, it's Audible only.
Oh.
And I had apparently got a free copy of the ebook like a while ago, and so I was able to get the audiobook for $7.49, which was nice. So we'll do that if it's fun. most of the reviews I've seen are good. And the narrator sounded pretty good. So I'm excited for that. And then after that, we've got another Old School School that I don't remember off the top of my head. But that gets us through October, which is crazy. I'm currently reading Cherish Reed's first, like, paranormal horror thing. And you're just making your way downtown through pumpkins, cursed pumpkins,
I've
lots
only
of
hit
different
on one
things.
cursed pumpkin so far this year, although I have a couple others up my sleeve.
She's got cursed pumpkins up her sleeve, guys. Got a binder full of cursed pumpkins. Is Halloween your favorite season? Or
I
like
mean, I love
holiday?
Christmas. I do.
Yeah.
But I don't love Christmas romances
Mm.
particularly, but I do love
Mm-hmm.
the like paranormal spooky but not scary, like
That's a good, yeah.
that vein of
Mm-hmm.
like if I'm gonna read seasonally, I'm gonna read those. Whereas I'm not I don't I it's hard for me to find a Christmas romance that I really like.
Mm-hmm. I
But
do
like
agree. I feel because you're not a huge Hallmark fan, are you?
no.
Yeah, and see, I really enjoy Hallmark, but that's because it's like a 2-hour max movie, and like it's a vibe. But stretching that out for like 8 hours sometimes is like, huh?
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, I have read today, as of recording, October 11th. And this month, I finished my 19th book today. Quite a
Damn.
few are novellas, but spooky
I know
novellas.
I've read a lot of novellas, but they haven't really been spooky. They've just been plenty.
Well,
I
spooky
finished
or paranormal. Some of
6,
them
7,
are
8,
just monster smut, which isn't restricted to October, but
no.
I don't really read monster romance outside of that because it's just not really
Mm-hmm.
my vibe. But right now, I'm like, yeah, he's a snake demon. All right.
Oh
Sounds
god,
spooky to me.
slithery little snake.
I'm a snake.
Gosh. Yeah. Well, we're gonna go continue reading our Halloween TBRs, and we shall see you next week.
Boy, shall we. Get ready.
I'm not ready for this jelly or this Gaywyck. So, yeah, it'll be a time for sure. Any parting words?
Yabbity yabba-doo. You know? That's
Yeah,
it. That's all I got in me.
that was a lot in you, so I'm
That's so
glad it's
true.
out.
It was really putting a lot of pressure and
Bang.
needed to be released.
Yeah, it was like the weight of the world was on your shoulders.
Yes. And now I'm
And
finally free.
she's free, guys. So, with
We're
that,
breaking free.
she's soaring. She's flying. There's not a star in heaven that she can't reach.
That's so real. So true.